the tragic fate of captive women in Apache conflicts. Small settlements of families had begun to spread across the region, building cabins, farming small patches of land, and trying to carve out a life in what they called the frontier. Life here was not easy. The heat in summer could be unbearable, and the winters could freeze the water in the streams solid. Food was never guaranteed, and every day brought a new struggle. Among these settlers was a young woman named Clara. She lived with her parents and two younger brothers in a small wooden cabin near the edge of a forest. Clara was strong, curious, and kind-hearted, with long brown hair that glowed like copper in the sunlight. She had grown up listening to stories about the land around her, the towering mountains, the wide rivers, and the desert that seemed to stretch forever. But she had also grown up hearing stories about the dangers of the frontier. People spoke of Apache warriors, brave and skilled in the ways of the land, who sometimes came into conflict with the settlers. Clara's family had learned to live carefully. Her father, a man of quiet strength, often reminded them to stay alert and to respect the land they lived on. He taught his children how to ride horses, how to track animals, and how to protect themselves if danger ever came too close. Clara loved learning these skills, though she sometimes felt anxious about the possibility of conflict. Her mother, gentle but firm, taught Clara and her brothers how to cook, sew, and care for the home. Life was simple, but it was filled with hard work and small joys. Each day began early. Clara would wake before sunrise and help her mother with chores, feeding the chickens and milking the cows. She would carry water from the nearby stream, her small hands gripping the heavy buckets as she balanced them carefully. After breakfast, she sometimes went with her father to check the fences or help with the small fields of corn and vegetables. Even on days filled with work, Clara found moments to enjoy the beauty of her surroundings. She loved watching the sunrise paint the mountains in shades of gold and pink. She would sometimes sit quietly and listen to the birds singing, feeling a deep connection to the land she called home. But even in these peaceful moments, there was an ever-present tension. Clara had heard of other families who had faced raids. She had heard whispers about neighbors who had lost livestock or had homes burned to the ground. Each story carried a warning. Life on the frontier was not only about hard work and survival, it was also about constant vigilance. The Apache people, fierce and skilled warriors, were defending their land and their way of life, and conflicts were frequent. While Clara's family wanted to live peacefully, they knew that danger could appear at any time, and they prepared for it as best they could. Clara often wondered what the Apache people were really like. She had seen them from a distance, riding on horseback with incredible speed and skill. She knew they were brave and clever, and she understood that their actions were not always meant to harm, but were often a response to the settlers moving into their lands. Still, the fear that came with their raids was real, and it affected how Clara and her family lived every day. At night, they would close the shutters and keep a lantern burning near the door. Clara would sometimes lie awake, imagining what it would be like if danger arrived while her family slept. Despite these fears, Clara tried to live fully. She had a few close friends in the settlement, and they would often run through the fields or explore the nearby woods together. She loved the simple pleasures of life, the smell of fresh bread baking, the warmth of the sun on her face, and the laughter she shared with her brothers. She was curious about everything, the plants in the forest, the animals in the fields, and the way the seasons changed the land. Her parents encouraged this curiosity, knowing that understanding the world around them was as important as protecting themselves from danger. One morning, as Clara helped her mother with chores, she noticed a strange quiet in the air. The usual sounds of birds and animals seemed to be missing, replaced by an uneasy stillness. Her father came running in from checking the fences, his face pale and serious. "Clara, take the children inside quickly," he said. Clara didn't understand at first, but she could see the fear in her father's eyes. She grabbed her younger brother's hand and ran inside, feeling her heart race. Outside, the sound of horses approached. Clara's mother quickly gathered their belongings and tried to calm the children, whispering that they must stay inside and be very quiet. That night, as they listened from the safety of their cabin, Clara's world changed forever. She could hear shouting and the distant sound of horses galloping. The once familiar land around them now felt dangerous and unpredictable. Her parents held her close, and she clung to them, trying to understand the terrifying reality that life on the frontier was fragile and uncertain. In those moments, Clara realized that the stories she had heard about raids were not just stories. They were warnings that could no longer be ignored. Even in the face of fear, Clara noticed small moments of courage and resilience. Her mother kept her younger brother calm, singing softly to distract him from the frightening sounds outside. Her father whispered plans, thinking of ways to protect them all, even if escape was impossible. Clara realized that bravery was not just about fighting. It was about staying calm, thinking clearly, and supporting those you love. These lessons, though learned in fear, became the foundation of her strength. Over the following days, the settlement tried to continue life as usual, but the tension was always present. Families reinforced their cabins, kept watch through the night, and taught their children how to respond if danger came again. Clara observed the adults around her, noticing how each person coped with fear in their own way. Some became quiet and withdrawn, while others focused on action, preparing defenses or sharing warnings. Clara admired the courage she saw, understanding that surviving on the frontier required not only skill, but also patience, resilience, and an unshakable connection to family. Clara's thoughts often wandered to the Apache people. She wondered what life was like for them, their families, their struggles, and their bravery. She realized that both sides of the conflict were human, with fears, hopes, and dreams. Yet, in the tension between these two worlds, women like Clara were often the most vulnerable. They carried the weight of protecting children, managing homes, and surviving dangers that men might face differently. Even as she played or helped with chores, Clara sensed the fragility of life and the need to be prepared for anything. One quiet evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky with fiery shades of red and orange, Clara sat near the edge of the forest, thinking about the life she lived and the life she wished for. She dreamed of safety, of peace, and of a future where she could explore the world without fear. At the same time, she knew that her reality was different. Life on the frontier was unpredictable, and danger could appear without warning. But she also knew that courage and careful preparation could help her and her family survive whatever came their way. Clara's story, though filled with fear and uncertainty, was also a story of resilience, hope, and human strength. She lived in a world where beauty and danger existed side by side, where each day brought new challenges and lessons. She learned to find joy in small moments, to treasure family and friends, and to face fear with calm determination. In these early days of her life on the frontier, Clara's character and courage were quietly forming, preparing her for the difficult journey that lay ahead. The days after that tense morning passed slowly, but the quiet was always fragile. Clara and her family tried to return to their routines, tending the fields, caring for the animals, and keeping the cabin in order. Yet, the sense of unease never left. Every rustle of leaves, every distant sound of hoofbeats made Clara's heart skip a beat. She knew life on the frontier was unpredictable, and the stories of danger she had heard were real, not just warnings. One afternoon, Clara was helping her mother hang laundry to dry when she noticed unusual movement at the edge of the forest. Shapes appeared between the trees, figures moving swiftly and silently. Clara froze. She could see shadows, but she could not tell how many there were or what they wanted. She quickly ran inside and told her parents. Her father's face grew serious. He had suspected that the raids might return, but seeing the figures himself made the threat real. The family had little time to react. Her father told Clara and her brothers to hide while he and her mother tried to prepare for what might come. In a sudden rush, the figures emerged from the forest. Clara could see they were riding horses, moving with a speed and skill that left no room for error. Her father shouted for the children to stay down, but within moments, the figures surrounded the cabin. Clara's heart pounded, fear gripping her tightly. She held her younger brother's hand, trying to stay calm. Her mind raced with thoughts of safety, escape, and survival. She did not know what the future held, but she understood that the moment required courage. Before she could react further, her father tried to negotiate. He spoke in a firm yet respectful tone, attempting to communicate peacefully. But the group's intentions were clear. They were taking some of the settlers away. Clara felt a surge of panic, realizing that she might not return home that evening. She wanted to scream, to run, but she knew that resistance might make things worse. Instead, she gripped her brother's hand more tightly and tried to steady herself. The world she had known, the comfort of her family, the safety of her cabin, was slipping away. As they moved through the landscape, Clara noticed how different the world looked from the back of a horse. The mountains loomed larger, the trees cast deep shadows, and the rivers seemed wilder and more untamed. She had always appreciated the beauty of her home, but now, in this moment of fear, the same land seemed both breathtaking and threatening. Every movement in the forest, every sound in the distance made her anxious. Yet she also began to observe quietly, learning from the people around her, their skill, their coordination, and the ways they navigated the land. The journey was long and exhausting. Clara's legs ached from holding herself steady on the horse, and her mind struggled to keep pace with the constant uncertainty. At times, she was allowed to dismount and rest briefly, but these moments were filled with anxiety rather than comfort. She noticed that some of the women and children taken with her seemed frightened, others resigned. Clara tried to stay alert and supportive, quietly encouraging those around her, sharing what little comfort she could. She understood that in situations like this, fear was natural, but courage and solidarity could make a difference. Along the way, Clara saw glimpses of life among the group that had captured her. She noticed that they had families of their own, and she could see kindness in their eyes at times. Some treated the captives with care, offering water or food when they could. Others were stricter, enforcing rules and order. Clara realized that, like her own people, these individuals had a complex world of relationships, duties, and challenges. Her fear remained, but she began to see shades of humanity, understanding that not everything was as black and white as it first appeared. Even during these moments of observation, Clara could not ignore the practical realities of her situation. She learned to walk carefully, to obey instructions quickly, and to remain calm even when fear threatened to overwhelm her. She observed the paths they took, noticing landmarks, rivers, and hills that might help her understand the land. In this way, her mind stayed active, focusing not only on survival but also on learning. Clara realized that knowledge, patience, and careful attention could provide a measure of safety, even in the most uncertain circumstances. At night, the group made camp near a small stream. Clara helped gather water and prepare simple meals under the watchful eyes of their captors. Though she was frightened, she tried to remain composed, comforting younger children and helping others when she could. Around the campfire, she sometimes caught glimpses of stories and songs, understanding that even in difficult times, people sought comfort in tradition and shared experience. These moments reminded her of the warmth of home and the resilience of the human spirit. Despite the harsh conditions, Clara found strength in small routines. She learned to wake early, to help with chores, and to pay careful attention to the movements of the adults around her. She listened and observed, trying to understand the group's patterns and behaviors. In this way, she felt a small measure of control, a way to keep fear from overwhelming her completely. She also began to reflect on the fragility of life and the importance of family and community. Every step she took through the wilderness reminded her of what was truly valuable: connection, courage, and the will to endure. Days passed, and Clara began to notice the changes in herself. She felt stronger, more aware, and more capable of facing challenges she had never imagined. Fear had not disappeared, but she had learned to live alongside it. She understood that life could be unpredictable and dangerous, but that did not mean she had to be paralyzed by it. Every morning, as the sun rose over the mountains, she felt a mixture of fear, hope, and determination. She knew that the journey ahead would be long and difficult, but she also knew that she had the resilience to face it. During the journey, Clara observed how the captors and their families relied on the land. They hunted carefully, moved quietly, and respected the natural rhythms of the environment. She realized that this knowledge, though different from what she had learned at home, was deeply practical and connected to survival. At times, she tried to ask questions, learning about plants, water sources, and signs of danger. Though communication was limited, she absorbed what she could, understanding that knowledge was a form of strength that could help her and those around her. Even in moments of exhaustion and fear, Clara found opportunities for small acts of kindness. She shared food with children who had less, comforted those who were homesick, and offered encouragement when spirits were low. She realized that courage was not only about facing physical danger, but also about maintaining compassion, hope, and connection in difficult circumstances. These acts helped her feel a sense of purpose, even when the world around her seemed chaotic and uncertain. As the days continued, Clara began to understand the rhythm of life on the move. She noticed how the group traveled, where they camped, and how they managed their horses and supplies. She observed carefully, learning strategies for survival and safety. Even though she was still a captive, she gained a deeper understanding of the land and the people around her. In this way, Clara transformed fear into awareness, vulnerability into quiet strength, and uncertainty into a form of resilience. By the time the group paused near a broad, open valley, Clara had begun to adapt to the harsh realities of her journey. She still missed her family and her home, but she had found ways to navigate the fear, to help others, and to learn from the people around her. She realized that courage was not about the absence of fear, but about the ability to act despite it. Each day, each step, and each careful observation became part of a growing strength within her, a strength that would carry her through the challenges yet to come. Clara's journey was only beginning, and she knew that the road ahead would be long and uncertain. Yet, even in the face of fear and hardship, she had discovered something vital: the human spirit's capacity for endurance, learning, and compassion. She understood that her life, though changed forever, was still full of meaning and potential. The frontier was dangerous, yes, but it was also full of lessons about resilience, courage, and the power of quiet determination. The journey stretched on for days, with Clara and the other captives learning to endure the long hours on horseback and the uneven paths of the desert and mountains. Each day seemed to bring a new challenge. Sometimes it was thirst, sometimes hunger, and sometimes simply the worry of the unknown. Clara kept her mind alert, always observing the movements of their group, noting the turns in the trail, and paying attention to even the smallest details of the landscape. Her awareness became a silent form of protection, helping her feel more secure despite the uncertainty around her. By now, Clara had begun to recognize some of the patterns in the group. She noticed that the captors followed strict routines, stopping at certain times to rest, checking the horses carefully, and making sure everyone knew their place. These routines provided a small sense of predictability in an otherwise unpredictable journey. Clara quietly adapted, learning how to stay out of trouble while still helping the others. She realized that patience and careful observation were just as important as courage in keeping herself safe. One afternoon, the group paused near a shallow river to rest and refresh the horses. The sun was high, casting sharp shadows across the rocky terrain. Clara knelt at the edge of the water, cupping her hands to drink, when she overheard some of the captors speaking quietly among themselves. She could not understand every word, but she recognized the tone of concern and urgency. Something was being planned, and she sensed that this might be an important moment in their journey. Her heart pounded, not with fear, but with a mix of curiosity and caution. Clara also began to notice the ways the captors interacted with one another. Despite the tension of travel and the responsibility of overseeing captives, they showed moments of care and cooperation. She saw one woman quietly adjust a blanket for a tired child, another helping a horse that had stumbled over rocks. These glimpses reminded Clara that, even in difficult circumstances, people could show kindness and humanity. It was a small comfort in the midst of an exhausting journey, and it gave her a deeper understanding of the complex world around her. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, casting long shadows over the valley, Clara realized that the journey was about more than just moving from one place to another. It was a test of endurance, resilience, and patience. She had already faced fear, uncertainty, and discomfort, but now she began to understand the importance of mental strength. She needed to remain calm, think clearly, and find ways to help herself and those around her. Each step of the journey was shaping her, teaching her lessons about courage, empathy, and adaptability. One evening, as the group set up camp near a grove of trees, Clara noticed that the captors had begun speaking of a meeting with another group from a distant area. They did not explain the purpose of this meeting, but the tone suggested that something important was about to happen. Clara could feel the tension in the air. She had learned to read the emotions of those around her, and now she sensed anticipation, concern, and careful planning. Though she remained a captive, she felt a small spark of hope. Perhaps there would be an opportunity to change her situation or gain more understanding of what was happening. During this period of waiting, Clara focused on supporting the other captives. She comforted children who were homesick, helped with simple tasks like gathering firewood and water, and shared quiet words of encouragement. She noticed that even small acts of kindness could lift spirits and bring a sense of normalcy to a challenging environment. Clara realized that resilience was not only about enduring hardship, but also about maintaining humanity and connection. These small gestures became a source of strength for both herself and those around her. As the days passed, Clara also became more aware of her own emotions. She experienced fear, hope, frustration, and curiosity in waves, learning to manage them carefully. She discovered that acknowledging her feelings, rather than trying to ignore them, made her stronger. By paying attention to her thoughts and reactions, Clara began to make small but important decisions about how to act, when to speak, and how to interact with others. This awareness helped her feel more in control, even in a situation where control was limited. One morning, the group was preparing to move again when Clara noticed a shift in the captors' behavior. There was more discussion than usual, and some members were traveling slightly ahead of the others. Clara observed quietly, keeping her thoughts to herself, but noting every detail. She realized that this could be a turning point, a moment when decisions would be made that might change the course of the journey. Her mind raced with possibilities, but she remained patient, understanding that rash action could be dangerous. Clara also began to pay attention to the landscape itself. She noticed subtle differences in the terrain, the direction of the wind, and the flow of water in the streams. She learned to identify landmarks that might help her if she ever needed to navigate the land on her own. Her observations became a quiet form of preparation, building her confidence and sense of agency. Even though she was still a captive, she felt a growing sense of awareness and skill that strengthened her resolve. The group eventually reached a wider valley where they paused for a longer rest. Here, Clara could see the vastness of the land stretched before her, the rolling hills, distant mountains, and open plains. It was both beautiful and intimidating. She realized that the land, which had once seemed familiar and safe near her home, now represented both challenge and opportunity. Her mind raced with possibilities, thinking of how knowledge, patience, and careful observation could help her navigate whatever came next. During this rest, Clara also noticed that some of the captives were becoming more comfortable with the routines of the group. They had learned to adapt to the rhythms of travel, to cooperate with the captors, and to support one another. Clara felt a quiet pride in how they had all endured, recognizing that resilience could grow even in difficult circumstances. She continued to focus on small acts of care, encouraging cooperation, and observing the behavior of the group. These efforts strengthened both her body and her mind, preparing her for the challenges that were still ahead. One afternoon, as Clara helped prepare a meal for the group, she overheard a conversation suggesting that they would soon meet another settlement or community. The captors spoke in hushed tones, carefully planning how to proceed. Clara did not know what this meeting would mean, but she sensed that it could be significant. Perhaps there would be an opportunity for negotiation, or a moment when the captive's situation might change. The uncertainty was both frightening and hopeful, and Clara felt her heart quicken with anticipation. As the day turned to evening, Clara reflected on how far she had come since the beginning of the journey. She had faced fear, learned to observe and adapt, and discovered the importance of patience, kindness, and quiet courage. Though she was still a captive, she felt stronger, more aware, and more prepared for what lay ahead. She understood that the turning point of her journey was approaching, and that how she responded could shape the days to come. By the time the sun set, casting golden light across the valley, Clara had grown more confident in her ability to endure. She had learned to navigate fear, build relationships, and find strength in small actions. The land, once intimidating and foreign, now offered knowledge and guidance if she paid attention. Clara realized that this turning point was not only about the decisions of those around her, but also about the courage, patience, and awareness she brought to each moment. As night fell and the group settled around the campfire, Clara quietly observed the shadows and listened to the sounds of the land. She felt a mix of emotions: fear, hope, curiosity, and determination. She knew that the days ahead would test her even further, but she also understood that she had already grown in ways she had never imagined. Each step of the journey had strengthened her mind, her spirit, and her sense of connection to the world around her. Clara's turning point was not sudden or dramatic. It was quiet, almost invisible, but deeply significant. She had learned to move with awareness, to observe carefully, and to act with courage. She had discovered the importance of empathy, patience, and quiet resilience. And she had realized that even in the midst of uncertainty, she could find strength, hope, and the ability to face what lay ahead. Though the journey was far from over, Clara now carried within her the knowledge that she could endure, adapt, and even influence the course of her own life. The turning point had come not from external events alone, but from the strength she had cultivated within herself. As the stars appeared above the valley, Clara felt a quiet determination. Whatever challenges awaited, she would meet them with courage, patience, and the quiet strength that had grown within her throughout the journey. The days that followed the turning point were full of new challenges and changes. Clara had begun to understand the routines of her captors, the rhythm of the journey, and the careful ways to navigate both the land and the people around her. Yet, she quickly realized that adapting was not enough. Every step carried consequences. some small and some profound, that could change her life in ways she could not yet imagine. As the group traveled through more rugged and unfamiliar terrain, Clara noticed how the landscape itself influenced the mood of the journey. The mountains grew steeper, the rivers swifter, and the deserts wider. Sometimes the sun beat down mercilessly, leaving her exhausted and thirsty, and sometimes the wind whipped cold and sharp, making her shiver despite the layers of clothing she wore. Each day tested her endurance, forcing her to pay close attention to her surroundings and to manage her energy carefully. She realized that survival required not only physical stamina, but also mental resilience, patience, and the ability to remain calm under pressure. Clara also observed how the journey affected the other captives. Some, especially the younger children, became increasingly homesick and fearful. They missed their families, their homes, and the familiar routines of their lives. Clara tried to comfort them, sharing words of encouragement and small gestures of support. She helped them gather water, assisted with chores, and reminded them to take one step at a time. She understood that morale could be just as important as physical strength, and she quietly worked to maintain it among the group. The captors, too, showed a mix of patience and strictness. Clara noticed that some of them were kind and attentive, offering guidance and assistance, while others enforced rules firmly and expected obedience without question. This created a careful balance, where captives had to observe, learn, and respond quickly to avoid conflict, while still maintaining their dignity and sense of self. Clara had become skilled at reading people's expressions and anticipating their needs, realizing that awareness and thoughtfulness could reduce tension and create small moments of safety. As the group continued, Clara began to notice a sense of community developing among the captives. They shared stories of their homes, memories of family, and small hopes for the future. Some of the older women quietly taught younger girls how to sew, cook, and care for the smaller children. Clara contributed when she could, sharing knowledge she had learned at home and encouraging others to stay resilient. These small acts helped create a sense of stability and support, reminding everyone that even in difficult times, human connection could provide comfort and strength. Despite these small comforts, the consequences of being away from home weighed heavily on Clara and the other captives. They faced the constant uncertainty of where they were going and what awaited them at each stop. Clara often thought about her family and wondered if they were searching for her or if they even knew where she was. The thought of being separated for an unknown period filled her with both fear and longing. Yet she also realized that she had no choice but to focus on the present, on the steps she could take to stay safe, help others, and remain alert to the possibilities around her. One morning, as the group rested near a stream, Clara noticed that one of the captors seemed troubled. He spoke quietly with another adult, glancing frequently toward the horizon. Clara's curiosity was piqued, but she did not dare ask questions. Instead, she observed closely, trying to understand what might be happening. Soon, the group began to prepare for a longer journey, suggesting that they were moving toward a distant settlement or community. Clara's mind raced with questions. What would this new place be like? Would it offer safety or new challenges? How would the captives' lives change once they arrived? During this period of preparation, Clara reflected on how much she had grown since the beginning of her journey. She had learned patience, observation, and quiet courage. She had discovered the importance of supporting others, even when her own fears were strong. She had begun to understand that resilience was not only about enduring hardship, but also about using intelligence, empathy, and careful thought to navigate difficult situations. These lessons would serve her well in the days to come, as the consequences of the journey began to unfold in unexpected ways. When the group finally arrived at a small, remote settlement, Clara realized that the situation was more complex than she had imagined. The settlement was modest, with a few cabins and tents scattered across a valley. The captives were brought inside and introduced to the community cautiously. Clara could see that the people here were curious and wary, both of the newcomers and of the outsiders who had brought them. There was no hostility, but there was a careful evaluation, a sense that trust needed to be earned over time. Clara observed everything quietly, noting how the captors and the settlement's residents interacted. She noticed moments of kindness and cooperation, but she also recognized the weight of social expectations and the consequences of mistakes. The captives were expected to follow rules, contribute to daily chores, and respect the routines of the settlement. Clara understood that their survival now depended not only on endurance, but also on adaptability, patience, and careful observation of social norms. During her time in the settlement, Clara also witnessed the impact of prolonged travel and displacement on the captives. Many were fatigued, homesick, or anxious about the future. Some struggled to adjust to the new routines, while others began to form bonds with one another, sharing stories, helping with tasks, and supporting each other in small but meaningful ways. Clara recognized that these relationships were vital for emotional survival. Even in uncertain circumstances, human connection could provide comfort, strength, and hope. Clara's own role became clearer as she adapted to life in the settlement. She helped younger children with daily chores, assisted with food preparation, and quietly observed the captors and residents to understand their expectations. She realized that her careful attention, empathy, and willingness to help created trust and respect. This awareness gave her a sense of agency, reminding her that even in a situation where she had little control, her actions could influence outcomes and provide security for herself and others. The consequences of her journey were not only practical but also emotional. Clara thought often of her family and her home, experiencing waves of longing and sadness. She realized that these feelings were natural and necessary, helping her maintain connection to the life she had lost and the values she carried. At the same time, she understood that dwelling too much on the past could weaken her resilience. She balanced remembrance with presence, acknowledging her emotions while focusing on the steps she could take in the moment to stay safe and help others. One evening, as Clara sat near the edge of the settlement watching the sun set over the mountains, she reflected on the journey so far. She realized that the consequences of being taken from her home were far-reaching. Her daily routines, relationships, and sense of security had all been disrupted. Yet, she also saw the growth that had come from these challenges. She had learned to observe carefully, act with patience, support others, and maintain hope even when circumstances were difficult. These lessons, though born of hardship, gave her strength and confidence. Clara also began to consider the broader consequences of the conflict around her. She thought about the settlers, the captors, and the land itself. She realized that life on the frontier was shaped by complex interactions between people, communities, and the natural environment. Each choice, each action, and each encounter carried consequences that could ripple far beyond the immediate moment. This awareness deepened her understanding of the world and her place within it, reminding her that resilience and careful thought were essential for navigating life's uncertainties. As the days turned into weeks, Clara continued to adapt to life in the settlement. She observed, learned, and helped in small but meaningful ways. She supported the younger captives, contributed to daily routines, and quietly earned the trust of both captors and residents. She recognized that the consequences of her actions extended beyond her own survival. They affected the safety, comfort, and morale of the group as a whole. This realization strengthened her sense of purpose, giving her a quiet confidence in her ability to face future challenges. Though the journey had brought loss, fear, and uncertainty, it had also revealed the resilience of the human spirit. Clara had discovered that even in difficult circumstances, people could show kindness, cooperation, and courage. She had learned to balance fear with awareness, sadness with hope, and dependence with agency. The consequences of the journey were profound, but they had also created opportunities for growth, understanding, and connection. By the time Clara had been in the settlement for several weeks, she had transformed in subtle but powerful ways. She had learned to observe the land and the people around her, to support others, to act with patience, and to maintain hope. She understood that her experiences had consequences that extended beyond herself, influencing the lives of those around her and shaping her own character. The lessons of resilience, empathy, and courage would stay with her long after the journey ended, preparing her for the challenges still to come. As the sun set one quiet evening, Clara reflected on how much had changed since the moment she was first taken from her home. She had faced fear, uncertainty, and displacement, yet she had also discovered strength, compassion, and quiet courage. The consequences of the journey were both challenging and instructive, shaping her into someone who could endure, adapt, and find meaning even in the most difficult circumstances. In that moment, Clara realized that while she could not control everything that happened to her, she could control how she responded, and that understanding gave her a sense of empowerment and hope for the days ahead. Time moved slowly in the settlement, but each day brought new experiences and lessons for Clara. She had come a long way from the frightened girl who had been taken from her home. Now, she walked with a quiet confidence, aware of the rhythms of the land, the people, and the community around her. Though she still missed her family deeply, she had learned to find strength in the present and to make her own contributions to the well-being of those around her. Clara spent her days helping with chores, caring for the younger children, and learning more about the settlement and its people. She discovered that many of the captors and residents had complex stories of their own, tales of courage, struggle, and survival. Listening to these stories, Clara realized that every person had faced challenges and had found ways to endure. She began to see that her journey, though difficult, was part of a larger human story, connecting her to people who had also overcome fear and uncertainty. As the weeks passed, Clara noticed a subtle shift in the settlement. People began to trust her more, seeking her help with small tasks and listening to her observations. She had earned a place of respect through patience, careful attention, and quiet determination. This recognition gave her a sense of purpose and belonging, reminding her that even in challenging circumstances, her actions could make a difference. She began to feel that, though far from home, she had found a new community in which she could survive and even thrive. Despite this growing sense of connection, Clara could not forget her family. She thought often of her parents and brothers, wondering how they were faring and whether they still searched for her. The longing to return home was a constant presence in her thoughts. Yet she had learned to balance this longing with the need to remain present and attentive. Dwelling too much on what had been lost could weaken her, but acknowledging it gave her motivation to endure and grow stronger. Clara realized that hope, when balanced with careful action, could sustain her spirit even in the most difficult circumstances. One day, as she walked along the edge of the settlement, Clara reflected on how much she had changed. She remembered the first days of her journey, the fear, the uncertainty, and the exhaustion, and compared them to her current strength and resilience. She had learned to observe carefully, to act with patience, and to support others in meaningful ways. She had discovered the power of empathy, courage, and quiet determination. These lessons had not come easily, but they had shaped her into someone who could endure hardship and maintain hope, no matter the circumstances. Clara also began to notice the ways in which the community had grown stronger as a result of her presence, and that of the other captives. By helping with tasks, supporting younger children, and maintaining morale, they had contributed to a sense of stability and cooperation within the settlement. Clara realized that resilience was not only an individual quality, but also a communal one. People could support one another, share strength, and create bonds that made challenges easier to face. This understanding filled her with a sense of purpose and pride. During her time in the settlement, Clara also learned valuable skills that would stay with her for life. She learned to recognize signs in the land, changes in the weather, tracks in the dirt, and subtle shifts in the environment that indicated opportunities or danger. She observed the captors, careful management of resources, their attention to the needs of the community, and their strategies for navigating difficult terrain. These lessons deepened her understanding of the world around her and strengthened her ability to adapt to changing circumstances. Clara's experiences also taught her about patience and timing. She realized that some things could not be rushed or forced. Whether it was gaining trust, learning a new skill, or finding solutions to challenges, careful observation and measured action were essential. She began to apply these principles to her daily life, thinking ahead, planning carefully, and acting thoughtfully. This awareness gave her a sense of control in a situation where control was limited, and it strengthened her confidence in facing future challenges. Over time, Clara began to share her own stories with the other captives and members of the settlement. She spoke quietly of her family, her home, and the lessons she had learned along the journey. She shared her observations, her knowledge of the land, and her understanding of human resilience. Her stories were met with interest and respect, and she realized that storytelling itself was a powerful tool. It helped preserve memories, teach lessons, and strengthen bonds between people. In sharing her experiences, Clara also reinforced her own sense of identity and purpose. Clara's growth was not only practical and emotional but also deeply personal. She had faced fear, uncertainty, and loss, yet she had discovered courage, patience, and empathy. She had learned to observe carefully, act with thoughtfulness, and support others. She had discovered the importance of community, hope, and perseverance. These lessons shaped not only her actions, but also her understanding of herself and the world around her. She realized that even in difficult circumstances, it was possible to find meaning, connection, and strength. One evening, as the sun set behind the distant mountains and the sky filled with soft colors of pink and gold, Clara reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. She thought about the moments of fear and uncertainty, the lessons learned through observation and patience, and the quiet acts of courage that had sustained her. She understood that her experiences had consequences far beyond herself, shaping the lives of those around her and deepening her own understanding of resilience and human strength. Clara also thought about the future. She did not know exactly what lay ahead or when she might return home, but she felt prepared to face whatever came. She had learned that life was unpredictable, that challenges could arise at any time, and that courage and careful action were essential for navigating uncertainty. She knew that the journey had equipped her with skills, knowledge, and inner strength that would guide her through whatever obstacles appeared. During these reflections, Clara felt a deep sense of gratitude. She was grateful for the small acts of kindness she had received, the support of other captives, and the lessons she had learned from both the land and the people around her. She realized that gratitude, even in difficult circumstances, could sustain hope and strengthen the spirit. It reminded her of the value of connection, empathy, and shared experience. Clara understood that her journey had not only tested her resilience, but it also revealed the richness of human courage, compassion, and perseverance. As the stars appeared above the settlement and the night grew quiet, Clara thought about the importance of memory. She realized that remembering the journey, the challenges, the lessons, the moments of courage, was a way of honoring both her own experiences and those of the people who had shaped them. She understood that memory could provide guidance, wisdom, and inspiration for the future. By remembering, she could carry the lessons of resilience, patience, and empathy with her, wherever life might lead. Clara also recognized that her story was part of a larger human story. She thought about the settlers, the captors, and the land itself, understanding that each life was connected to others in ways both visible and invisible. She realized that challenges, hardship, and displacement were part of the human experience, but so were resilience, courage, and hope. Her journey had shown her that even in difficult circumstances, people could find ways to endure, adapt, and create meaning. In the weeks and months that followed, Clara continued to grow stronger, wiser, and more confident. She learned to navigate the routines of the settlement with skill and patience. She supported the captives and community members in meaningful ways. She observed the land and people carefully, learning lessons that would guide her for life. And she reflected often, understanding the importance of resilience, empathy, and courage in shaping both her own character and the lives of those around her. Finally, Clara began to imagine what life might be like after the journey ended. She thought about returning home, reuniting with her family, and sharing the lessons she had learned. She also imagined using her experiences to help others, offering guidance, support, and understanding to those facing uncertainty or hardship. Clara realized that her journey had given her more than endurance. It had given her wisdom, compassion, and a deep understanding of the human spirit. As she looked out over the valley one quiet evening, Clara felt a sense of peace. She understood that life would always bring challenges, but she also knew that she had the strength, patience, and courage to face them. She had endured hardship, adapted to new circumstances, and discovered the power of connection, empathy, and resilience. Her journey had shaped her, but it had also prepared her for the life that lay ahead. Clara's story was no longer just about fear or uncertainty. It was about growth, courage, and the quiet strength that comes from enduring and learning. She had discovered that even in the most difficult circumstances, it was possible to find hope, meaning, and connection. And as she settled into the rhythm of the settlement, she carried with her the lessons, memories, and inner strength that would guide her for the rest of her life. Through it all, Clara understood one simple truth. Life was fragile, unpredictable, and sometimes frightening, but it was also full of beauty, connection, and opportunity. The journey had been long and difficult, but it had revealed the strength of her spirit, the importance of community, and the enduring power of hope. And with that understanding, Clara faced the future not with fear, but with courage, awareness, and the quiet confidence of someone who had truly grown.